If a little green is good, more is even better. Now, back to Green is Good with John Shigarian and Mike Brady.
Welcome back to Green is Good, and we're so excited today to have Jonathan Kaplan on the line. And Jonathan's a project specialist in the health program, and he coordinates the NRDC's efforts to promote alternatives to pesticide use. And prior to the NRDC, he was the program director in Northern California for the wonderful organization called Waterkeepers. Welcome to Green is Good, Jonathan Kaplan.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, we're honored to have you. You're doing great stuff, and we're here sitting. Mike and I are in the Central Valley in Fresno, California, where we tape our show Green is Good every week. And, you know, this is sort of the ag belt of the United States now, if not part of the world, really. And so this is such a relevant conversation, an important conversation to be having with you today. So we're so thankful for your time. So tell us a little bit of what the relationship is to the food and the pesticide, and what is your specialty with regards to food and pesticide and how we're growing it now and what the future is of organic food.
Sure. You know, I think, well, you're obviously right there in the heartland of American agriculture in the Central Valley of California. In the bigger picture, here at NRDC, we're very concerned about the role of food and agriculture in trying to solve some of these really big environmental problems like global warming and water scarcity. When you look around the globe, you know, we find that agriculture is about a third of human-caused greenhouse gas emissions, is a leading user of water, uses a lot of chemical inputs that degrade our waterways and air quality, and, you know, has other environmental impacts. So if we're going to solve these problems, agriculture has to be part of the solution. And at the same time, we're concerned about the loss of farmland. I think we're losing a couple thousand acres of farmland to urban development every day in this country, and that provides or causes, you know, more permanent environmental challenges, creating more habitat for cars, which, you know, is a whole other nest of thorny environmental problems. So we've got to make our agricultural system work better. We're going to have to feed another couple of billion people on this planet by 2050 or so, and we're going to have to make this work for growers.
So I know 2 years ago, the NRDC, which Mike and I are huge fans of here at Green is Good, of course, launched the Growing Green Awards. What are the awards? How did they start? And what are you trying to do with them in terms of a platform?
Exactly. Well, a platform's a good word. We are very excited about some of the innovation that's coming from this sector, and we wanted to create a way to kind of tell the story of some of the leaders in the field who are out there doing really innovative things. So we created the Growing Green Awards. We have put out a call for nominations far and wide. We're into this now in our second year. And this year we got about 170 applications. We screen those internally by NRDC staff, and then we invite a panel of judges, real luminaries in the world of sustainable food systems, to come preside over, you know, these finalists and make the final choices. And I should tell you who's on our panel this year.
Sure.
We had it was chaired by Susan Clark, who directs the Columbia Foundation, and on the panel we had A.G. Kawamura, our Secretary of Agriculture, Michael Pollan, author and food celebrity, I guess. We had Nora Pouillon, who is the founder of the nation's first organic restaurant. And let's see, I've gone down my list here. So we had a really strong set of applications. We have announced our winners, and I can tell you who they are.
Well, before we go into the winners, there's a lot of our listeners here in California and across the United States and even in other parts of the world that want to know, if they want to nominate a friend, a relative, a business associate, how do you even nominate? What's the criteria for the Growing Green Awards?
Well, we're really looking for innovation, scalability, potential to have a real impact in the system, and we have, we're just kind of wrapping up our process this year. We'll do it all again next year. We'll probably send out a request for applications, sometime in late 2010 or early 2011. Any of your listeners can go to our website and sign up to be on our mailing list, so you get that announcement when it comes out. You can just send an email to gga@nrdc.org, and we'll let you know when we're up into our next awards cycle.
And on the NRDC.org website, you do have a Growing Green button, so people can actually read about it, see all of your the panel, the judges, and also read about the winners on that, right?
Exactly. So you can just go to nrdc.org/growinggreen or Google that, and you'll get a little bio of each of our winners, what they've accomplished. We produced a mini video that will be posted shortly if it's not already available, and you can sign up again to be on our list.
Well, let's talk about this year's winners. I want you to talk about them and then describe why they're unique or innovative, why they were chosen, and then I want to bring it back down for our listeners to, I want you to explain the importance of buying local or organic and the issue of the pesticide and water and how we're growing our food. So let's go back to the winners. Who are this year's winners, and why were they chosen out of the 170 applicants, and why are they unique and innovative?
All right. Well, so we had 4 award categories this year.
Okay.
The first category is our food producer category, and that's the only category that gets the cash prize. We offered a $10,000 cash prize for the food producer category, honoring the businesses out there actually growing or producing our food. This year, that award went to Russ Lester of Dixon Ridge Farms. Russ is a California grower. He grows organic walnuts on about 500 acres.
Wow.
Outside of Dixon, and he has been a leader for several decades in pioneering ecologically integrated farming systems. Most recently, in addition to being organic, he has sought to reduce his greenhouse gas and energy footprint. So Russ has adopted a system. He's installed a digester to convert walnut shells into electricity. So he's offset about 25% of his farm's energy use, and he's on track to be energy neutral by 2012.
He has my vote right there.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting work he's doing.
And right now, too, Jonathan, I'm on your site on the NRDC site, and I've gone onto the Green Awards, Growing Green Awards tab, and I'm reading an article that Russ put together, just absolutely fascinating, and we would encourage our listeners to do the same thing and find out more about the winner.
Yeah, please come visit us, nrdc.org/growinggreen.
Okay. So what's your next category?
So
who's your next winner?
Let's go to our business leader.
Sure.
In the business leader category this year, we gave the award to Carl Coopers of Shepherd's Grain. Carl co-founded a cooperative of wheat farmers in the Columbia Plateau up in Washington State. Wow. And he and his growers have perfected a no-till wheat farming system which preserves the soil on their farms and reduces energy use and tractor emissions. And more importantly, he has created a market for an environmentally superior wheat product. And that might not sound like a big deal at first glance, but when you look at the way wheat is traded in this country, it's really just a generic commodity. It's commingled, it's invisible, it trades on price alone without consideration for environmental benefits or environmental performance. But Shepherd's Grain has created an identity for the wheat that is grown under this no-till system, and it's sold locally to regional markets in Portland and Seattle, I guess, and increasingly down here in California. So he's created a way to get an economic return for an environmentally superior product in the marketplace.
And as you're talking about these great leaders who have created these new processes, is it your goal and is it their goal for their paradigm to be replicated by other farmers in the United States and around the world?
You know, we're not going to say that these particular models can work everywhere for all crops.
Okay.
But yes, you know, absolutely. We think that these are inspiring stories, and we hope that they give new confidence and inspiration to other entrepreneurs in the industry and in these these subsectors of the industry.
Wonderful. Who's your next winner?
All right, so let's go to our thought leader category. There we gave the award to Dr. Fred Kirschenman. Dr. Kirschenman is a distinguished fellow at Iowa State University at the Leopold Center there. He's also the president of the Stone Barn Center for Food and Agriculture in New York, and he has really been a mentor to many of the advocates in the sustainable food community, to policymakers, to his students, obviously, who has written extensively on many aspects of sustainability in the food sector, has helped illuminate the loss of mid-sized farmers in agriculture, and has really made an important contribution intellectually to all of this work.
And who is your next winner?
Finally, our water steward winner this year is Mike Benziger of the Benziger Family Winery. In addition to making great wine, the Benziger Winery has promoted organic and biodynamic wine grape growing, and they've also adopted a really innovative system at their winery to capture rinse water from the winery operations and reuse it. They run it through a wetland to purify it, and then they can reuse it to irrigate the wine grapes. So they save millions of gallons of water a year by doing that.
Wonderful. So those are your 4 winners this year.
That's who we got this year.
Wonderful group. That is really amazing. And then when is your and what's the award look like? Is it an actual physical award, or is it what actually happens with these people?
You know, I rarely get asked that question, but I'm glad you did. This year we handed each of the winners a ceremonial fork with a nice little engraving under it.
Nice.
That is awesome.
And then, of course, Russ gets a check, and we also promote all the winners through our own networks and through, media channels as we can.
Hey, and listen, and Mike and I are going to do this right on the air. If you ever want to recommend them, we would love to have any and all of them at different times on Green is Good, because they all deserve it. They all are doing really wonderful, revolutionary, and cutting-edge and innovative things to help make our world a better place.
Well, that's a great offer. And, I was just on a panel with them live this morning for another show, and they are, in addition to being innovative, they're extremely articulate, each and every one of them. So having them on your show, I think, would be a real treat for your listeners.
Hey, so now that we've talked about that, let's talk about something that's so personal to the Valley and something that you are an expert in. Let's talk about the water problems that we're having as it relates to both the Central Valley and the ag industry, and to just other parts of the world. Talk about a little bit about what you know about water and why is that important to farmers, and why is it important for us to conserve? Because this sounds funny, Jonathan, and this sounds like a funny connection, but a couple of weeks back, Mike and I had the great leaders of Roto-Rooter on the show, and their whole conservation and green movement from their company, reinvention of their company, has to do with water conservation, because we're running out. If not, we're in a shortage position not only here in California, but across America and across the world. So we know this is a critical issue, and we know you're an expert, so we'd love you to hear your take on this.
Sure. Well, that's interesting. I'll have to try to find the archives of that show and find out what Roto-Rooter's doing. But meanwhile, here in agriculture in California, as there in the Central Valley, water is scarce. We've had a lot of rain recently, but we're still in a serious drought situation, and the future is particularly daunting given predictions of increasing population growth and climate change, which will place increasing demands on dwindling water resources and lack of stability for snowpack in the Sierras, et cetera. And that's a problem that's really playing out, in communities around the country and around the world. I understand that about 1 in 3 people now around the planet live in a region where there's real water scarcity. Agriculture is the largest user of water. Globally, we hear that 70% of fresh water supplies are used by agriculture. Here in California, I think that number is closer to 80%. So any way you slice it, agriculture is going to have to be part of the solution for managing our water resources carefully. We obviously need water to grow food, but any way that we can use that resource more efficiently, grow the most water-efficient crops in the right places, is going to go a long way.
And what stages of food production uses the most water, just as a form of information? Because so many people are in the ag industry that listen to our show, and we get so many emails from the ag industry. We know this will have an impact on them. Obviously it's important to conserve water, and that's a constant theme now and for the foreseeable future. But where is water used the most in food production? I
think that there may be some exceptions, but generally we would expect to see the most water used at the farm level. The actual irrigation of the crop is usually the biggest part of the water footprint. We were just doing some research here recently for our Growing Green Awards benefit, and for example, found research showing that it takes 2 to 14 gallons of water to produce 1 glass of wine. And most of that water, almost all of it, well, not almost all of it, but I'd say 90% or so is in the vineyard. So that's where the action is, and the big range in that particular number apparently is the location where the wine grapes are grown, where you've got relatively more water being used inland in the Central Valley as opposed to coastal vineyards.
So talk a little bit about, let's tie the your water expert status together with your great Growing Green Awards that you and the NRDC run and have created. So let's tie it together for our listeners. How can our listeners who want to make small changes in their life but help effectuate real change in this world, how can they do that by buying local, organic? And is there a difference between local and organic food and food that is imported or otherwise? Explain some of the differences and some of the wow statistics that you can share with our listeners to help motivate them to buy more local and organic food and support our great sustainable farmers who are really taking leadership roles in the green movement.
Well, let me just start out. There are a lot of pieces to that question, but let me just start out by saying that individual actions by consumers are tremendously important. People think that I'm just one person, I don't matter. But it's not true. It matters the most. And when consumers go to the store manager and ask for things, it makes a huge impact. It so rarely happens that when it does, corporate leadership really pays attention and tries to respond to what consumers are looking for. So you gave us a couple good recommendations: buying organic and local. Those are obviously very important. There are other sustainability certifications beyond organic that can help.
Such as what should our listeners look for? Because we always love for our great guests to give tips for our listeners to actually use in practice. So what are the tips you can give them?
There's some websites that have reviews of different individual eco labels. NRDC has a website called simplesteps.org. You can go to our site, click on the food button, and you'll get some recommendations and some reviews of some of the certifications that are out there.
It's run by the wonderful Wendy Gordon.
Wendy is the mastermind of a lot of our communications work here.
Okay. And what else?
Let's see, where was I? So buying local, buying organic, buying in season, those are all important things. I have to say, how the food is produced matters, but the type of food that you buy is also really, really important. It turns out that beef and dairy, for example, have much, much higher environmental impacts than other kinds of meat like poultry, or certainly far, far higher than vegetables, grains, nuts, and other food choices. So reducing meat consumption, I think, should be a big consideration for your listeners. Trying to eat more fresh eating closer to the
Source.
base of the food chain, more fresh fruits and vegetables.
So talk about a little bit about, Mike and I don't like scare tactics. We don't believe that's a great way to educate. We believe more in bringing on great experts like you for education purposes and to spread the word that are and information that our listeners can use. Talk a little bit about, without scaring us all, the impact of pesticides and how can we gauge how much pesticides are in certain foods that we're trying to buy or compare against each other, and what are the alternatives to pesticides now that are evolving?
Well, the greatest risk from pesticide use is typically faced by farmers and farm workers who are right there in the fields at the front lines.
Gotcha.
NRDC is very concerned about the health threats facing farm workers from using these chemicals. There's obviously also concern about pesticide residues on food. Imported foods tend to have higher residues of riskier materials, so eating in season when you know that the food on the shelf is likely to be grown somewhere nearby is also a good strategy for the consumer to reduce exposures. Organic, obviously, is a great strategy for reducing that particular risk. And, we're seeing throughout the industry interest in less toxic materials, but there are still some real areas of concern. We're seeing in California, for example, a proposal to register a new pesticide called methyl iodide, which is extremely carcinogenic. It's actually used by cancer cell researchers to cause cancer in laboratory animals for the purpose of studying the cancer cells. We see widespread degradation of drinking water resources in the Midwest from some of the herbicides used there. So while technology is getting better and there are more choices on the market for growers, we still have some real problems.
That's wow. Well, you gave us tremendous information today. Mike and I are really excited about what you're doing with the Growing Green Awards and the NRDC is doing with the Growing Green Awards, and we hope that this show will inspire others to apply next year and to keep pushing the limits and creating greater and better innovative practices for sustainable farming. And we just want to refer our listeners back to nrdc.org/Growing Green. You could read about all the Growing Green Awards and the judges, and also this year's winners who are very inspirational, and also the site that Jonathan gave out, simplesteps.org. It's a great site run and owned by the NRDC and has tremendous great information in there. And we just want to thank you today, Jonathan Kaplan, for your time. You and the NRDC are truly living proof that green is good.